Hello, everyone. I'm Susan Solovic, and this is the 1% Edge podcast. Thanks for joining me. I was recently reading a Harvard Business Review article about the importance and power of mindful thinking. The authors recommended 10 minutes a day of mindful thinking. And, that really sounds simple enough, doesn't it? Just 10 minutes. Yet I imagine if I could see all of you, and I'd ask for a show of hands right now, 80% or more of you don't carve out time for that sort of reflective self-improvement. There are just too many things on our plate. Our schedules are hectic. And if you're like me, you find yourself on autopilot a lot of times, where you're just going through the motions and you're marking off those things on your to-do list. Well, if you can't do it for yourself, then perhaps it's time you think about considering a coach. Someone to create a discipline around you and your business and hold you accountable. Someone like today's guest, my longtime friend, Dan Coughlin. Dan serves as a thinking partner for executives and business owners to help them achieve their most desired outcomes. He's provided over 3,500 coaching sessions to 200 executives since 1997. And now, in addition to coaching individuals, Dan provides practical advice in executive coaching group sessions. And these are small groups of like 4 to 8 people at a time, and they can be anywhere in the world, or you can be anywhere in the world to be part of these groups and these sessions with Dan. Dan's also a keynote speaker and a prolific writer, and you can find many of his insightful articles right on my website, susansolovic.com. Dan, thanks so much for taking time out of your schedule to talk to me. So, Dan, I love your work. I mean, it is very, very insightful. I learn something every time I read one of your articles. But you write and talk a lot about the any person mindset. I'd like for you to elaborate a little bit on that. What do you mean by that?
That's really my core belief about individuals, groups, and organizations, and it's really pretty simple. It just says any person can make a significant difference in an organization, but nobody is born with the necessary traits. These are learned thinking traits. So your article, your Harvard Business Review article, I really think the key is how we think affects our traits. I mean, it's not our natural traits, it's our developed traits that really make the impact.
That's
I'm a big believer that any person can make a huge difference in a company or an organization, but it's mostly a matter of how they think.
So I think that's a great point. I read a book on habits not too long ago, and it talks about how, we get into habits and we form those habits. I was talking about autopilot, but you can consciously get yourself out of those habits. Is that also what you're sort of alluding to here?
Yeah, many years ago, maybe 20 years ago, when I was first starting out on my own company, I went to a seminar at a client, and they talked about this really interesting dynamic. Ideas become actions, actions become habits, habits that impact results. But it all starts with an idea. Then it's reinforced with a action, and then the key is the repeated actions, and then it becomes a habit, and then the habit is what really drives the result. So the key is the habits that we develop.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you think? I mentioned about how hectic things are today. We all have a million things on our plate, especially if you're running your own business. You're going 24/7 practically. What do you see from your perspective, Dan, as the 3 greatest challenges that business owners and business leaders face today?
Well, I tell you, there's 3 that have come to my mind. I think based on the people I've worked with, which is about 200 people, they work too many hours, they have too many goals, and they won't say no to almost anything. Typically, when I coach somebody, one of the very first questions I ask is, how many hours do you work in a week, and how many hours do you want to work in a week? And what happens is, always the first number is bigger than the second number. So let's just say they say 65 hours I work and I want to work 50 hours. I will say to them, well, what would it take for you to work 50 hours in a week? And right away, that's when the magic starts to happen. They say, I would have to focus more. I'd have to not allow interruptions. I'd have to let go of some things. And right away, in my opinion, they are becoming more effective just by putting a parameter on how many hours in a week they work.
That's fascinating. How do you get people to be that disciplined, though? Because there's always something going on. There's a fire to put out somewhere.
Now, the key is that it doesn't happen right away. The key is that I have to challenge them 2 or 3 times. So let's say the second phone call saying, okay, so you said you wanted to work And then they start to dig in more about the reasons why it was so important. And little by little, gradually, they wean themselves down to what they want to work. But they become so much more effective in doing that.
In your experience in working with individuals, do you find that, I guess there's this thing about being addicted to stress, being addicted to the hype. Do you see some of that? And maybe that's why people say we want to work 50 hours a week, but we really end up working 65?
I think that's exactly what it is. When we were growing up, people that are high achievers today, when they were growing up, many, many times they were rewarded for doing more. So they were
Right.
on 3 sports teams, they had straight A's, they were in the student council, and then they started their career. And the same thing happened. The more they could say they did, the better they felt about themselves.
Right.
But it's a trap because at some point it becomes really, really counterproductive. The hardest thing in business, I think, is to say no. So a lot of times, an exercise I do with people is what I call the 1-3-6 exercise. What's the one goal you want to achieve? What 3 things can you personally do to achieve the goal? But the third question is the real kicker. What 6 things do you need to stop doing or spend a lot less time doing so you have the time and the energy to do the 3 things that you know are going to really matter to achieve that goal? And people struggle unbelievably with letting go of things. But if we don't let go of things, if you have an already full plate,
Yeah.
and you try to add 3 more important things on top, all we end up doing is diluting our impact. So the hardest thing is to say no, but it's also one of the most effective things.
I agree with you. I used to work with someone who used to say to me, when you say yes to one thing, you are effectively saying no to something else because you only have so much bandwidth that you can produce and something's going to give somewhere. The other thing is we started off talking about mindful thinking, and at Google, I'm sure you're familiar with this, they give their employees like 20% of their time to spend thinking and working on projects that they're passionate about. And they've actually had some great business results from that. But it also heightens an organization's creativity. And I know that you think imagination is important. What is the upside of imagination, in your opinion?
Well, it's critically important. All progress happens because we see something that doesn't exist right now. So what I would encourage you or anyone to do is when you get an idea, and you're actually a great example of this in many ways, but when a person gets an idea of something that they could do, start to feed the idea. Write it down, even if it's one sentence. The next day, write down 2 or 3 more sentences and nurture the idea until you can totally see it. And then once you see it, then you can begin to move toward it. So the upside is enormous. I mean, that was really the great secret of Walt Disney.
Yeah.
He visualized a theme park of what it could become, and then he fed it and fed it. He would call it plussing it. He kept plussing the idea until it was so real that it became a reality. And he did it. I mean, there's probably 10 examples. Steve Jobs is another great example
Yeah.
of being able to see it and then make it a reality.
Well, you mentioned Walt Disney. What I like about Walt Disney too, though, is he said, he didn't imagine it and build it and then that was the end. He said, our work is never going to be finished here. So it was always about being creative. But is there a downside to using that imagination?
Yeah, there really is. Here's the problem. If we just let our minds go, just freely without trying to guide it in some way, we can oftentimes walk ourselves right into an intensely negative emotion. For example, we might imagine a conversation with your boss. A person might imagine a conversation with his or her boss where the boss is going to fire them. And they build this up in their mind and to the point that they are just about ready to quit because they know they're going to get fired. And they have to stop imagining it. Or something happened 10 years ago. It's over. It's done. I've actually had situations where the person has already passed away, but the other person is still reliving the memory as though it's happening right now. And just as you're walking along, these negative imaginations can creep back into our minds, and they can take over. So that's when we have to be able to say, stop imagining it,
Yeah.
because it's not real. It's not happening right now, or it may never have even happened.
Well,
Back then.
I've certainly, in my own experience, I've gone through something and I've walked out and said, well, wow, that wasn't nearly as bad as I had anticipated. And it's sort of a relief, but you think of all that angst you went through before you got to that point.
Yeah, the time and the energy we waste on negative imaginations, that's time and energy that we could be putting towards staying focused, towards achieving something. So that's really important. When it
Yeah.
stop imagining it, and then move back into your day.
Right. So I know that you work with a lot of executives and managers, business owners, but really at the end of the day, none of us, I mean, myself included, I have the best people on my team ever that make me look great. How does a leader really bring out that best in people in order to build success?
I think you have to understand what each person needs. So we can go into a really in-depth thing on that, on what the person needs, but here's a real simple approach. It's an old approach I learned a long, long time ago called can, will, won't. So there's four buckets a person could be in. They can do the job and they will do the job. Those are the people you want to give more responsibility
Mm-hmm.
to bring out the best in them. If they can't do the job, but they will do the job, they need more training. They need more specific development, step-by-step training. If they can do the job, but they won't do the job, those are folks who have the ability, but they don't have the intrinsic motivation.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would suggest is a question. And the question is just simply, if you do a great job in your work today, how will yourself,
Mm-hmm.
family, your boss, your work team, your organization, your customers, your suppliers, if the person spends 15 minutes just writing down all the benefits that other people will get and they will get if they do their job well, it brings out that intrinsic motivation. And then the last category is can't, won't. The person can't do the job and they won't do the job. That may be a person to let go. It may not be
Yeah.
a great job for that person. But if you have to keep the person, I would suggest you first start with the intrinsic motivation question and then move into the training question, the training steps.
Yeah.
But that's how I think you bring out the best in people, is realize that not everybody needs the same thing.
Right.
They're different.
Well, I think a lot of us make the mistakes of we hire individuals for a particular position and skill set instead of looking at an individual holistically and where could they go, how could they benefit the organization over the long term.
Exactly. You can easily fall into that trap. The other trap people fall into is they think they hired themselves.
Yeah.
Whatever the person brings to the table, they think that their issues are the same as my issues. And so they start trying to do for them what they think they need, but that's not the case. The other person is a different person.
Right.
You got to figure out what they need.
Right, right. You must have known me many years ago when I was an early manager because I'm a big planner. You know, the first thing I do when my feet hit the floor in the morning is I'm scheduling out every minute, every second of my day. And, you know, I don't get it when people don't do that. But anyway, in my older years and my wisdom, I'm okay with it now. And, you know, one more thing I want to mention to you because I was on a flight from Canada recently. I sat next to an international, he was an international coach in figure skating, and now he's like kind of like you, a coach's coach, you know. But we were talking about talent and how it really isn't always the most talented skater or athlete who really wins. It's, you know, talent only takes you so far. You've got to want to do it, like you're saying.
Oh, definitely. I mean, there was a great book came out, Jeff Coleman's book, Talent is Overrated. But a really, really good book on the topic you're talking about is called Peak.
Yeah.
Anders Ericsson. It's a great book about the greatest performers in the world. The real key was intentional practice. That's really the difference maker. But Peak
Yeah.
by Anders Ericsson is a terrific book.
So let's go back to being a leader. What do you think really makes an effective leader? I mean, we've touched on people, but what else makes an effective leader?
Well, ultimately, it's about influencing other people and how they think. That's leadership in my mind, influencing how other people think so they make decisions that improve results. But I would say there's three things that are hidden that a lot of people don't think about because they'll see the leader, but they don't realize the hidden parts. The first is calmness. I really think calmness is the most underrated business leadership trait of them all. If you can stay calm when the drama in the room is rising, you're able to really effectively influence people. The second big one, but really the big meaty one, is understand yourself. Most people, or many people I should say, try to emulate another person's leadership style and to be that person. We can learn from other people, but we can't be the other person.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I suggest things like know your values, your temperament, your character strengths, your talents, your passions, and your sources of self-confidence. And then the last thing to be an effective leader is you have to be personally effective. If you can't use your
Sure.
So because people can see through that so fast.
Yeah, there's a lot of do as I say, not as I do going on out there. Absolutely. So you also talk, well, you mentioned it slightly, but you talk about influence. When I was growing up, over my bedroom door, I had this little sign that said, "Diplomacy is the art of letting someone else have your way." And I always loved that. I continue to think about that in business. But what are some ways that you can influence people without sounding like a dictator or micromanaging?
Yeah, this is the real art. I mean, everybody has to develop their own art of influencing other people. But here are three things that I think anybody can develop that are effective. One is the storyteller. Just tell it like your story right there. That's such a beautiful example. I'm scrolling up. I had the sign over my ear. Just telling the story, and then in the end, of course, having a point that you want to try and get across. I mean, there's masters at this. Steve Jobs actually was one of the real masters at that. I think the facilitator, the old Socratic method, ask an open-ended question, especially when it's two people, and let them be the teachers, the thinkers. Draw on ideas and then summarize what you've heard. You can be incredibly effective without ever having to make the great statement. Just let other people weigh in and then summarize what you've heard. And the last one that I think is so important is the encourager. I mean, in my opinion, the three most important communication devices that I've ever seen are a pen, a piece of paper, and an envelope. If you could just write a good handwritten letter, not three sentences or one sentence, but paragraphs, a whole letter, it's incredible. My dad passed away, but my dad was an amazing letter writer. My mom is an incredible letter writer. But you can impact people in business. I encourage everybody in business. Have a stack of cards right there by you. And write real notes, not just, hey, great job, but something personal, something meaningful. I
Wait,
think those three things, storytelling, facilitating, and encouraging.
you know,
Those are three effective ways.
I love what you say about those handwritten notes, a handwritten letter. I mean, instead of 140 characters with a lot of stupid abbreviations in it, right? And it's really something I actually need to do a little bit more of. I try to be cognizant of it, but it's time, right? Everything's about time. So I'm going to ask you one last question, Dan, and that is, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but do you think, I mean, we've talked here about Steve Jobs and Walt Disney and some other great leaders. Do you think there is a void in leadership right now?
No, no, I don't.
No?
I really don't. Here's a phrase I hear a lot. I've been in business now for 20 years, but I've been out of college for 32 years, I guess. I've heard this phrase so many times, something kind of like that, where they'll say, young people aren't like they used to be. And I always challenge that because I work a lot with young people in volunteer roles today, and I have for 30 years, and they're just as great as they were then. I think what it is I'm reading a book right now on Harry Truman, this book here on David McCall's.
Oh, yeah, I have that. I haven't read it yet. Is it good?
Oh, it's great. That's
Great,
great.
yeah.
But what he says is, they fought each other and they bashed him and they bashed him and they made fun of him as the president. This was over 50 years ago.
Yeah,
And the same is happening now.
yeah.
It's true for Barack Obama. It's true for Donald Trump. It would have been true for Hillary Clinton.
It was true for Ronald Reagan. Yeah, yeah.
They bash Ronald Reagan. But my point is, I think there's a lot of good influencers who don't just get a lot of media attention. So do I think there's a void in leadership? No, I think there's still people who have the ability to influence other people. It's just, I think a lot of times, both the media and us as
Yeah.
individuals, we tend to see the bad side and we harp on that, but we don't really see the effective leadership. Like what you're doing with this show right here, I think this is actually a great example of effectively influencing small business owners. So to me, there is a lot of effective leadership going on. We just don't focus on it very often.
Yeah, we're always ready to pick out the bad stuff rather than focusing on the good. Yeah. Well, Dan, this was really insightful. Tell us where we can find you if we want to get more information, read some of your articles and things like that.
Well, sure, you can always come to my website, theCoughlinCompany.com. I don't know if they can see it somehow.
Yeah, we're going to have a link to it. So, yeah.
So the best place, really, I mean, I have over 100 articles, 100 videos, but it's just a lot of, I hope, very practical advice.
That's great. And you're on social media, so can we look for you on Twitter or Facebook?
I am on all those places.
That's great.
Come to, Facebook.com/The Coughlin Company.
All
You
right.
can definitely find me there.
Okay.
LinkedIn and Twitter and all those places.
Excellent. Well, and we will, as I said, we'll have a link to all of that on our website too. So, Dan, thanks I know you're busy. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. I also appreciate all of you for joining us and listening in to the 1% Edge podcast. Our goal here is to bring you the best of the best in thought leadership and advice so you can build the best in your business. Build that competitive edge, that 1% edge. And join us weekly for more great content right here. Thanks.